daaronder bij de grote rivier. O, breng mij terug naar die oude Transvaal, daar waar mijn Sarre woont. Daaronder in die mil is bij de groendoornboom, daar woont mijn Sarre Mare.
Hi everybody, from me, Cherry Carter, Chloe, and from Trooper Chloe Carter, who's in on some R&R from out hunting mice in the Spelonken. She's really a good little mouser, this one. She knows she certainly executes prisoners, and she often leaves us a head or entrails like Jack the Ripper would be proud of. Don't you? Yes, you do. I thought I'd come out here and get a bit of sun. The old winter or late autumn is settling in now. We're having the open fires every night. Had to go out and get our firewood collection. Oh, she's coming up. You're going to disturb me? Come on then. There you go. Come on. Come on. Come on then. Hey, speak now or forever hold your peace. Anyway, last week I went out to Seymour, the old, where we've got an army base around here called Puckapunyal. Very old army base. The boys from Vietnam would have gone out there and trained. I think it was established around World War I, you know. Would have been right out in the middle of the bush back then. It still is kind of bush. So they got emus and that out there. We don't see emus around here. But anyway, yeah, Seymour's a town that grew up around Puckapunyal, and I went out because they had a military collectibles market weekend in like a exhibition hall. So I was curious to see what sort of Boer War stuff they had, and they did have a bit. There was probably about 20 stalls, I suppose. Some of it wasn't really applicable. Some old guns. I didn't think I had any interest in old guns until I thought of Mausers. A Boer Mauser would look fantastic on my wall. But you do need a license for any, I spoke to some of the guys, any guns before 1900 that you can get ammunition for, you need a license. So that rules out a Mauser. And anyway, the price was exorbitant. I was looking for swords. I'd love a sword like Captain Salmon had in that photo, or Major Eddie. I don't know what happened to that sort of ordnance. I always thought that a sword would be handed on to the family, but I'm not sure now, because this fellow was showing me this bayonet that he was selling, and it had various markings. So he says it was a Boer War bayonet, but then it was reissued in World War I and reissued again for World War II. You could see these date stamps on the hilt of the bayonet. So maybe the sword was a property of the Victorian government. Maybe they just handed it on to somebody else, rather than, I thought maybe they'd bury the sword with the soldier or give it to his family, but maybe that's not true. Maybe they hand it on to somebody else. So if any of you guys know military matters, let me know in the comments. But anyway, I'll show you what I did get. Chloe, I got this, and they're not rare. Chocolate box. Queen Victoria sent all the troops, all her boys I call them, a tin of chocolate for New Year's 1900. This one is in reasonable condition. As you can see, the Queen is quite worn, a bit rusty, but the writing and the paint is vivid. You can make out she's written, "I wish you Happy New Year," and it looks like Victoria. "I wish you a Happy New Year, Victoria," and it's got the the emblem and the crown and the date, South Africa 1900. No chocolate in it, of course, but that was affordable. I've always wanted one, so there, I got one now. So we're up to chapter 10 of Times and Crimes of the Bushveldt Carbineers. This will be the last one before the arrest and the trial. The guys, they don't know what's coming. They don't know the building sort of furore that's growing, or the discontentment in Pietersburg for their actions. They've got no idea, I don't think, at this stage. There's going to be one last hurrah. We hear from Witton. I'm still going through his Scapegoats of the Empire. We hear that Morant is in a very morose, depressed mode. His killing of Boers hasn't seemed to satisfied or cheered him up in any way. He's still grieving Captain Hunt, and in fact in this episode we hear him getting permission to go down to Pretoria to sort out some of Captain Hunt's belongings, or his will, or whatever it is that Morant has to do. I'm not sure Morant ever gets back to Fort Edward. I think he might have been arrested before he got back, so we'll find out about that in the last chapter next week. Today's is about capturing a Veldt-Cornet, a fellow called Kelly, who was of Irish extract. Turned out they weren't really a commando because they had their women and children with them, which the Boers did. I mean, that contributed to the big loss at Pietersburg, that the women and children wouldn't leave their men behind, and because of that, the Boers suffered their first big major defeat. They lost like a quarter of their men in one action, the Boers at Pietersburg. But anyway, that was a long time ago from where we're at today, talking about what's going on at Fort Edward, and Lieutenant Witton and Hancock and Morant and Major Lenihan's come up because he's hearing some pretty distressing stories coming out of Fort Edward. So he's come up to have a quick look around, to act like he knows what he's doing, or act like a commanding officer should. But we know from plenty of sources that he's pretty bit of a useless commanding officer. Seems to like to just stay down in Pietersburg and probably drink at the Pietersburg club, or drink. So yeah, it's been a long haul. If you've stuck with me, if you've been vaguely interested in these stories, good on you. You've got a backbone. I find them fascinating, but then again, because I was there, yeah, the whole thing ties in. The movie, to going there, to meeting Charles, to seeing some of those places, and to being back now and going through Charles's book and bringing the stories to you. It's really woken up in me a fresh passion for the Bushveldt Carbineers, or the story of them. I think I'll also bring you a couple of little edits from Scapegoats of the Empire, maybe in a separate episode, because there's a couple of little stories or observations that Lieutenant Witton makes. That yeah, and yeah, I told you guys I interviewed some time back the great nephew of Lieutenant Witton. Wish once again that I'd have read this book and even read Scapegoats of the Empire to ask him more intelligent questions, although he didn't really know, his great nephew didn't really know that much about Lieutenant Witton. The family never really talked about him. Alright, Chloe's getting a bit cosy. She wants to sit on my knee and sit in the sun. That's not going to happen because we've got editing to do, Chloe. We've got work to do. And these fellas out there, and any ladies that are coming along for the ride as well, you know the drill now. Get your horses water, get your horses fed, shoed, and we're going out one more time. We're going out into the Spelunken because of this word of commandos out there. Commander Bayers and Veldt-Cornet Kelly are out there to cause trouble apparently, so we've got to ride out to the Spelunken and capture these Boers, put an end to their shenanigans, because the war's coming to a close soon, and it's time to bring them in. Over and out.
O breng mij terug naar jouw Transvaal, daar waar mijn Sarre woont. Daar onder in die mil is bij de groendoorn.
Okay, so if you've stuck with me this far, well done. And we're coming to the end of the exploits of the Carbineers, especially Morant. They've no idea of the gathering storm back at Pietersburg. But on the same day of the Van Staden killings, we heard about those in the last episode, Major Lenihan, he's still the commanding officer, and he's come up to Fort Edward from Pietersburg. They haven't seen him for a while. He's an infrequent visitor. He doesn't really seem to be a very effective leader. But, according to Charles's book, it was an infrequent visit, and maybe he came up to investigate the Reverend Heath's murder, right? Because there were questions being asked about the high profile of Reverend Heath. So we don't really have much documentation of Lenihan's visit, apart from George Witton, and I am still going through the Scapegoats of the Empire, reading them online, and picking up some interesting tidbits here and there. But this is what Lieutenant Witton says about Lenihan's visit. He says that normally Morant was merry-hearted, but now he's become gloomy and morose, and it seems to have been caused by the death of his friend, Captain Hunt. He's still grieving, and even Lenihan comments that Morant seemed seriously affected by grief. So Witton states that he just got back from Pietersburg. He'd learned that 2 strong forces of Boers were in the district and could pose a threat to Fort Edward. Commandant Beyers, he's an interesting guy. We might learn a little bit about Beyers. But he was supposed to be commanding one group, and the other group was under Veldt-Cornet Kelly. Sounds like an Irishman. Well, he kind of is. Tom Kelly was supposedly approaching from the Portuguese territory. He was of Irish descent, but married to an Afrikaans woman, and he became very attached to the Dutch-speaking community. His farm, Ballymore, that's a real Irish name, it was close to the fort, and he was reputed to have a fiery temperament, and his return to the area with artillery that he was rumoured to have could have been problematic for the Carbineers. They were always worried about these Boers in the Spelonken having an artillery gun. So on hearing Witton's report about these 2 groups of Boers, Morant requested Lenihan give him leave to take a patrol to capture Kelly and his men. His request was granted, and Morant sets off on Monday the 16th of September 1901 with a patrol of 30 men, including Witton, and they head east towards Birthday Gold Mine. Okay, so they've gone to a village of a chief called Baniella, and they've learned from the chief that a few days earlier, Kelly, his camp was only 2 miles away, and he'd visited the chief earlier, and they'd been drinking the potent brew from a fermented sap of Malala palms. Maybe because of the drinking, Kelly declared he was quite willing and able to wipe out 1,000 Englishmen should they dare to approach his lager. So now we get a detailed description from Witton as they approach the lager at midnight. And they wait, this is the Carbineers wait in the Zomba River bed just below Kelly's camp, and the dawn attack. Kelly and his party were taken completely by surprise and were literally still in their beds, probably still had hangovers. After storming the camp and disarming the 9 crestfallen men and rounding up women and children, the Carbineers realised that this was certainly not a commando, and after establishing that there was no truth whatever in the rumour of artillery, the long trek back to Fort Edward began. So according to Tol Pinard in his book, Neem 8 de Verleden, at one stage on the trip back to base, Morant ordered the Boer men to walk some distance behind their wagons. But Veldt-Cornet Kelly's wife, Maria Johanna, also known as Mieta, became suspicious of that and called out to the other women to join her and accompany their men, that they were onto it. All right, don't separate us from our men. The next outspan, Witton whispered to her that her action had saved the lives of the men, as it had been decided by the other officers to shoot them. Here's our old friend Trooper Silk. He claimed to have personally captured Kelly while he was still at the opening of his tent. He wrote in his deposition, quote, "But I fell hopelessly in love with 2 of the girls, Miss Kelly and Miss Nell, but couldn't decide which I loved the best. They couldn't talk English and I couldn't talk Dutch, but we got on all right just the same. Anyway, let's get back to Lieutenant Witton and his story about the trip back to Fort Edward with Kelly and his and the Boers. So he reckons when we arrived back at the Fort Edward, two of Kelly's daughters left the wagon. I asked them where they were going. They replied, home, to get the house ready, not knowing that their home was now a heap of ruins. I could not tell them, as I knew the effect it would have on them. After fighting in the early stages of the war, Commandant Kelly had returned to his farm, which was situated about half a mile from Fort Edward. As soon as the Carbineers were in the district, he went off again on trek with his family rather than surrender. I should have asked Charles about Ballymore when I was there, if there was anything left. Anyway, on the 25th of September 1901, Lieutenant Morant writes a report to Major Lenihan. He gives his position as about 25 miles east by south of Birthday Mine. His report on the capture of Kelly is very similar to that told by Witton. He expressed the hope to be back in camp on Tuesday the 1st of October. So this is Morant's report. He says Kelly and his 9 Boers are the last remnants of a commando which has caused much trouble in the Spelonken, and his capture renders this district free from the enemy. Men and horses of the patrol are well, though the horses are only grass-fed, no mealies. The troops living till we reach the Birthday Mine and what game the country affords. Kelly's crowd are intact, and I trust to give a safe delivery. As the country is now clear, I should like permission to escort these prisoners personally to Pietersburg, leaving Lieutenant Hancock in charge of the fort. And if possible, I'd like very much to go to Pretoria for a couple of days to settle up the affairs of my friend, the late Captain Hunt, as he wished me to. I will write you upon my arrival at Spelonken. I have the honour to be, sir, yours obediently, Harry Morant, Lieutenant, Officer in Command, Bushveldt Carbineers, Spelonken. So Morant's patrol had performed well, travelling 130 kilometres each way on virtually non-existent bush paths, and capturing Kelly's patrol in less than 2 weeks. Morant received a congratulatory message from Colonel Hall in Pietersburg, which said, very glad to hear of your success and should like to have an account of what must have been a good bit of work. So Witton reckons in The Scapegoats of the Empire, Morant's career in South Africa was adorned by not a few such as this, but accounts of those who were never published, broadcast to his credit, to balance the stories scattered to his detriment. So, yeah, Witton saying Morant did some good work. He probably did. Well, he did. Yeah, we know that. So Morant personally escorted Kelly's group to Pietersburg. His request for a fortnight's leave was granted by Lenihan, and he left Pietersburg by train for Pretoria to complete formalities in connection with Captain Hunt's will. I wonder if he ever goes back to Fort Edward, because they're going to be arrested in the next episode. During his leave in Pretoria, Morant stayed at the Transvaal Hotel. The guest register of the hotel in the private collection of Professor Franz Johann Pretorius shows that Lieutenant Harry Morant was accommodated there on the night of the 6th of October 1901. After the war, a granddaughter of Veldt-Cornet Kelly stated that, to her knowledge, her grandfather certainly had no plans to attack Fort Edward, and rumours of artillery were nothing more than that. Kelly, with his family and a few friends, were merely biding their time in the relative safety of the eastern region of the Spelonken until they received word from Beyers. Due to the close proximity of the fort, Kelly's wife and daughter were no longer safe on Ballymore Farm, so Kelly decided for security reasons to take them and some other Boers a short distance from the Portuguese border. There they would wait communication from Assistant Commandant General Beyers regarding further plans and action. So what happened to Kelly? Well, he was sent to Ceylon as a prisoner of war. A few carved items bearing his name, the date and locality on display at the Lalapanzi Zotsmanberg Skirmishers Museum. Okay, well, I went to that museum. That's where I stayed, at the Lalapanzi Hotel. I didn't notice, or I didn't know about Cornet Kelly to look at those items at the time. Once again, I wish I'd have read this book before I went on that tour. So Kelly's wife and daughter survived the concentration camp and returned to the ruins of the farm after the war. So to just finish the story, Tom Kelly's wife and daughter, they survived the concentration camp. They go back to the ruins of the farm after the war, and according to a descendant, the farm and everything on it was burnt and devastated by looting. So her grandmother-in-law, this is Tom Kelly's wife, had to do laundry for neighbours to try and keep the family alive until Tom returned from Ceylon. Here's a person called Hassan Shawk. Her grandparents were working for the Kelly family during the war. She must have been like a servant or something. And she did an interview with Australian Channel 9 in 2010. And she told Kelly's descendants that when local farmsteads were being plundered and burned by the British soldiers, his grandfather and other farm workers loaded furniture pieces from Veldt-Cornet Kelly's house onto a wagon. Together with a small herd of cattle, delivered it to the Ephrata mission station in the valley, south of Ballymore. It's not clear whether these possessions were ever recovered after the war. Veldt-Cornet later Commandant John Thomas Kelly and his wife Maria Johanna were buried years later on the farm East Lynn, west of Kildare and Ballymore, and not, as originally thought, in the Kelly family cemetery on Ballymore. Names and destinies of the other men and women that were with them have not been researched. So that's the story of Veldt-Cornet Kelly and his wife. So finally, in this chapter, this doesn't involve the Bushveldt Carbineers per se. It involves Captain Taylor, and Charles has put it in his book, so I'll just make a brief mention of it. Word came into Sweetwater's intelligence office of Captain Taylor that there were some Boers that were gold panning. They were in the vicinity of the Birthday Mine and the Louis Moore gold mines, and apparently they'd amassed a quantity of gold, and that of course interests our friend Captain Taylor. So the Boers were travelling east along the Babubu River in the direction of the Fulkwani River, but they were warned by their black scouts that the soldiers were on their tail. Taylor and some of his intelligence officers or his men followed them. So there were 2 Boer men and families, and they kept their flight, but they were captured by Captain Taylor and a mounted patrol. They'd already ditched their wagon in the river, apparently. Maybe they were hiding the gold, or maybe they never had it. In any rate, when Taylor questioned them, they denied having the gold, and Taylor had them shot in front of their families and had their women instructed to bury their husbands or their men. Taylor, there was also a black guy that was driving the carts or was involved in scouting for them, and Taylor lost his cool with this African guy and went up and shot him. So the murder of the 2 white men and the black witness were never featured in the court-martial. as was the case with several others. Captain Taylor was never charged with these documented murders. And they actually found the graves of those guys. They were actually in the Kruger National Park now. They were found in 1964. But here's something else. Interest with possible connection to the action of Captain Taylor is a statement made by Wao Abasini Jr. in 1971 that he knew of a grave of 4 Boers that he'd recently discovered, and he attributed that to Captain Taylor. The additional incident concerning the 4 Boers does not form part of the known Bushveldt Carbineers killings. Yet again, Taylor, as far as can be ascertained, was neither questioned nor charged for this reported or reputed murder. Also, there was common knowledge that Taylor was responsible for the cold-blooded murder of many blacks, particularly Shangans. They're from Zimbabwe. This could have been the reason that Taylor had the local nickname of Bulala Zonke Mashangwana, the killer of Shangans. However, it remains a nagging thought that will forever be impossible to prove or dispel, and it concerns the artillery that the Boers are reported to have in their possession as opposed to the gold on the wagon. It's unlikely that the 2 Boer gold panners could have amassed such a vast amount of gold that a wagon would have been required to transport it. So what else could they have been transporting that was so heavy that it couldn't be unloaded and concealed, but instead had to be ditched into the river? When they knew the soldiers were on their tail, they ditched this wagon into the river. Could it have been the pom-pom gun and ammunition that Kelly was rumoured to have received from General Viljoen's commando? Wouldn't it be the first time that Boer artillery was concealed in a river? Study of old maps of the region and the terrain itself shows that the Louis Moore gold mine, where the gold panning Boers started from, and the Zombo River, where Kelly and his group were captured, are remarkably close together. Could this exercise of Captain Taylor and Lieutenant Morant in any way have been coordinated? Had it succeeded in delivering both Veldt-Cornet Kelly and his artillery? If indeed he had any, it would have been proclaimed the highlight of the Bushveldt Carbineers' occupation of the Spelonken, and brought much acclaim to the officers concerned.
Die oorlog is nou klaar en die huis toe gaan is daar terug na die ou Transvaal. My hartland wag vir my en ek sal so al te bly haar swingies met myne beta. O bring my terug